Between 1850 and 1900, over 500,000 pioneers faced the deadly challenge of winter survival on the treeless Great Plains with no building materials except what lay beneath their feet. Using nothing but dirt, grass, and sheer determination, they literally went underground to create shelters that would save their lives through blizzards capable of freezing a person solid in minutes. Here's what life was really like in the hidden earth homes of America's most resourceful pioneers. So, yeah, if these stories help you sleep, subscribe, and I'm curious, what time is it where you are? Comment your location and time. Someone from Birmingham left a comment last week saying they listen on their evening walk, which is wild to think about. Okay, tonight we're exploring pioneer dugout houses, but before we go anywhere, get comfortable. For real, adjust those pillows. Pull that blanket up, because where we're headed, comfort was hard to come by. The cold hits you first. Not the gentle morning chill you're feeling under your warm blanket right now. This is something else entirely. This is prairie cold, the kind that doesn't just nip at your fingers, it bites clean through them, the kind that turns your breath into little ice crystals that actually make a tinkling sound as they fall to the ground. Yeah, that's how cold we're talking about. You've been travelling for months. Your wagon wheels have cut through muddy rivers, dusty plains, and now the September winds are picking up, carrying the unmistakable threat of winter. You're on the Great Plains, this endless ocean of grass that stretches as far as you can see in every direction. And there's a problem, a really big problem. Where are the trees? Your 10-year-old asks, looking around at the vast emptiness. Where indeed? Back east, you just find a nice stand of timber, chop down some logs and build yourself a cabin. Simple. But here, nothing but grass, miles and miles of nothing but grass, and winter is coming, a prairie winter that will freeze anything alive as the local folks keep warning you. We'll figure something out, you tell your family, but you're not exactly convinced yourself. You squint at the horizon where a strange little bump breaks the perfect line between earth and sky. As you get closer, you realize wait, is that smoke coming out of the ground? You approach carefully until you see it. Not a traditional house at all, but a door built into the side of a small hill with a tiny window beside it. Smoke rises from what looks like a chimney made of stacked prairie sod. "Hello there," calls a woman standing outside. Her face is weathered, her clothes practical, and her smile genuine. You folks looking for a place to settle? When she invites you inside, you're not sure what to expect. You duck your head to enter and step down into a house. An actual house dug right into the hillside. It's not fancy, just one room about 12 by 16 feet, but it's astonishingly comfortable compared to your months in the wagon. "It's a dugout," she explains, gesturing around. "Only way to survive out here when you first arrive." You look around in wonder. The walls are part earth, part stacked blocks of prairie sod, dense chunks of dirt held together by grass roots cut like bread loaves from the ground outside. The roof is made of wooden poles, clearly hauled from many miles away, covered with layers of grass and more sod. The floor is hard-packed earth, swept clean and surprisingly comfortable underfoot. "It's warm," you say, surprised at how the bitter wind outside doesn't penetrate this underground sanctuary. "That's the beauty of it," the woman says with obvious pride. "In winter, it stays warm. In summer, it stays cool. The earth protects us." What strikes you immediately is how different this thinking is from everything you know. Back east, people built houses to stand apart from the landscape, to rise above it, to conquer nature. Here, these settlers are doing something completely different. They're becoming part of the land, working with it rather than against it. How do you even build something like this, you ask, running your hand along the surprisingly solid wall. First thing, she says, is finding the right spot. That's the most important decision you'll make. Get it wrong and you'll be flooded out or frozen solid by Christmas. She explains how they chose the south-facing slope of this low hill. This gives them two critical advantages: protection from the deadly north winds that sweep down from Canada, and maximum sunlight during the short winter days to help warm the dwelling and dry the ground around the entrance. The slope helps with drainage too, her husband adds, coming in through the door with an armful of what looks like dried dung. Water runs downhill, away from the house. You don't want to be swimming in your bed come spring thaw. You notice how the single window and door face south too, capturing precious light. Inside, the walls have been covered with newspaper pages, pinned up with small sharpened sticks to keep dirt from constantly falling onto everything. It's not much, the woman says, noticing your inspection, but it beats freezing to death. The family's few possessions are arranged neatly around the edges of the room. Some handmade furniture, storage trunks, cooking implements hanging on the walls. A small cast-iron stove radiates surprising heat throughout the space. What are you burning? You ask, noting the lack of firewood. The husband laughs, holding up one of the dried patties he brought in. Buffalo chips, dried dung, burns slow and hot. Later it'll be cow chips from our own animals. Out here you use what you have. You're taking mental notes because this might be your reality very soon. The entire approach is revolutionary. You're not building a house on the land. You're cutting it from the earth itself, becoming part of the landscape rather than fighting against it. Most folks see these as temporary, the woman says, reading your expression. Build a proper frame house once they've got money from a few good harvests. But honestly, some of us prefer these. Quieter, safer. When those prairie winds howl, they just slide right over top of us. That night, as you camp nearby, you can't help but notice how the family's dugout almost disappears into the landscape as darkness falls. The only signs of human habitation are the warm glow from the tiny window and wisp of smoke from the sod chimney. The next morning, with the couple's advice and help from a few neighbours, you set about finding your own perfect location. This is a decision that could literally mean life or death. You pace the nearby hills, considering each subtle rise and dip in the landscape with new eyes. That one, says a neighbour, pointing to a gentle south-facing slope about half a mile from a small stream, high enough to stay dry, close enough to water, and you'll be sheltered from the north. That's where I'd build. And so it begins. Your first task is marking out a rectangle roughly 12 by 16 feet into the hillside. With borrowed shovels, picks, and immense effort, you begin to dig. The physical labor is brutal. Every cubic foot of dirt has to be loosened and then carried out by hand. Your back aches. Your hands blister, then callous. Your children help by carrying smaller loads of earth away from the growing hole. This is going to be our home, your daughter asks, skeptically, looking at what appears to be nothing more than a rectangular pit about 5 feet deep into the hillside. It will be, you assure her, and it'll be warmer than any house we had back east. The digging alone takes nearly 2 weeks of dawn to dusk labour, but finally you have the basic structure, a rectangular space dug horizontally into the hill. The back and side walls are the earth itself, while the front will need to be built up with sod blocks. Cutting these blocks becomes the next monumental task. Using a borrowed breaking plough, you cut long strips of the thick prairie sod, then chop them into blocks roughly a foot wide, 2 feet long, and 4 inches thick. Each block weighs about 50 pounds, held together by the dense network of grass roots that have been growing undisturbed for centuries. Like bricks, your son says, helping to haul them to your dugout site. earth bricks. The front wall rises slowly, block by block, with spaces left for a door and small window. Neighbours help you harvest the few wooden beams needed for the roof, travelling nearly 20 miles to the nearest river where some stunted cottonwoods grow. These precious wooden poles will support the roof, perhaps the most crucial part of your new home. If the roof fails, an old-timer warns you, the whole house fails. Take your time with this part. The wooden poles are laid side by side across the top of your dugout. On top of them goes a layer of brushwood or whatever branches you can find. Then comes a thick layer of the tallest prairie grass you can cut, creating a crucial air gap that will serve as insulation. Finally, more sod blocks are carefully fitted on top, grass side down for the first layer, then grass side up for the second. The roots will grow together, explains your neighbour. By next summer you'll have a living roof. Flowers might even grow up there. As the weeks pass, your family adds refinements. The dirt floor is sprinkled with water and swept repeatedly until it's nearly as hard as concrete. The walls are lined with any newspapers or cloth you can spare. A small cast-iron stove, perhaps your most valuable possession, is installed with a chimney pipe extending up through the roof. By the time the first snow falls, you're snug inside your underground home. Outside, the wind howls with frightening intensity, driving snow into drifts taller than a man. The temperature plummets to 30 below zero, but inside your dugout, wrapped in Earth's embrace, your family sits comfortably around the small stove, which burns slowly on dried dung collected during the fall. It's actually warm in here, your wife says with wonder, as the blizzard rages outside. That first winter teaches you what the Great Plains settlers discovered through desperate necessity. Sometimes the most ingenious solutions come from working with nature rather than against it. Your dugout isn't just a temporary shelter, it's a completely different philosophy of housing, born from the unique challenges of this treeless, windswept land. You're not just surviving on the frontier, you're adapting, evolving, learning to think differently about your relationship with the harsh landscape around you. As you drift off to sleep in your underground shelter, the blizzard still raging outside, you realize something profound. The pioneers who ventured into these treeless plains weren't just stubborn or brave, they were innovators who completely rethought what a house could be when faced with impossible challenges. And while you lie there listening to the muffled howl of the wind that can't reach you beneath your living sod roof, the temperature outside continues to drop. But you don't feel it. The earth itself has become your protector, your insulator, your shelter. You found a way to survive by becoming part of the landscape itself. Outside, frost forms on the prairie grass. Inside, your family sleeps, warm and protected, in a home made of earth and ingenuity. The morning after the blizzard, you wake to an eerie silence. No creaking timbers, no rattling windows, just a profound stillness that you've never experienced in any wooden house. You light a small candle, precious out here where every supply must be hauled for miles, and look around your family's new dugout home. In the dim light, you notice something strange. "There's frost on the ceiling," your daughter whispers, pointing to the delicate crystals that have formed where the warm, moist air from your breathing meets the cold underside of the sod roof. You reach up and touch it. "It'll melt as the day warms," you tell her. You've learned that a dugout breathes in its own way, sometimes collecting moisture, sometimes releasing it. It's alive in ways a wooden house never could be. As you stoke the small stove with more dried dung, you're still getting used to calling it buffalo chips or prairie coal like the neighbours do, you hear a scratching at your door. Probably just the wind, your wife says, but when you open it you find Martha Jenkins, your nearest neighbour, from a mile away, standing there with a basket. "Brought you some breakfast," she says, stepping in and stomping snow from her boots. First blizzard's always the hardest. Martha's face is red from the short walk in the biting cold. She sets down fresh bread and a jar of preserved berries on your small table. "How'd your roof hold up?" she asks immediately, glancing upward. "Fine, I think," you say. "Why?" Martha sits on one of your crude chairs. "First winter, you never know. Some folks build their roofs too thin. One good snow load and..." She claps her hands together suddenly, making everyone jump, wakes up with half a ton of snow and sod right in their bed. Your children's eyes go wide. "Don't scare them," your wife scolds. Martha laughs. "Nah, your daddy built a good one. I watched him double layer those sod blocks. Smart." She leans in, serious now. "But check that chimney every few days. Snow can block it, send the smoke back inside. Killed the Anderson family 2 counties over last winter." This is frontier life, where casual conversation jumps from breakfast to deadly dangers without missing a beat. Everything is life and death out here, and everyone knows it. "Got one more question for you," you say, cutting into the fresh bread. "What's that smell in here?" Martha sniffs the air and smiles. "That, my friend, is what we call dugout perfume. Mix of earth, smoke, cooking, people, and whatever critters have moved into your walls." Critters? Your son perks up. "Oh, sure. Mice for certain. Maybe some snakes looking for the mice." Your wife nearly drops her plate. "They're more scared of you," Martha assures her. "Usually." After breakfast, you bundle up and step outside. The prairie has transformed overnight. What was once an endless sea of golden brown grass is now a blinding white expanse stretching to the horizon. The snow has sculpted itself into graceful drifts, some taller than you. The cold hits your face like a slap. But the most remarkable thing is your house, or rather, the lack of it. From 20 feet away, your dugout is nearly invisible, just a small, sod-covered bump with a thin wisp of smoke rising from the snow-covered roof, while your neighbours, who built traditional wooden cabins, are completely exposed to the elements. Your home has essentially disappeared into the landscape. You notice a small opening in the snow on your roof, a perfect chimney tunnel created by the rising heat, nature working with your design, not against it. Back inside, your family settles into the rhythm of winter life. The dugout's small size, just that single room about 12 by 16 feet, means every movement must be coordinated. When someone needs to get something from a trunk, everyone else shifts like dancers to make space. At night, the sleeping arrangements are tight, pallets laid out on the floor like sardines, with parents on the outside to block drafts from reaching the children. "I miss having my own room," your eldest daughter says one evening as everyone prepares for bed. "I miss having walls that don't occasionally fall on my head," your wife adds, brushing dirt from her pillow where some earth had crumbled from the ceiling. The lack of privacy is perhaps the hardest adjustment. Every conversation, every moment happens in full view of the entire family. The only privacy comes from the darkness of night or stepping outside into the freezing cold, neither a particularly appealing option. Yet there are unexpected gifts too. The forced proximity brings a closeness your family hasn't experienced before. Stories flow more freely in the evenings. You notice your teenage son and daughter arguing less, finding ways to accommodate each other in the tight space. Your youngest starts sleeping tucked against your side, something he'd stopped doing years ago. "Remember that hotel in St. Louis?" your wife asks one night, voice dreamy in the darkness, "with the separate dining room and that fancy pitcher and basin? Never thought we'd be nostalgic for a water pitcher," you murmur, making her laugh. "And yet," she says, squeezing your hand under the blankets, "I'm not sure I've ever felt as safe as I do right now, with half of Nebraska piled on top of our roof, keeping us warm." It's true. While the dugout lacks the refinements of Eastern living, it provides the one thing most crucial on the frontier: security. The thick earthen walls muffle the howling winds that can drive people mad with their constant screaming. The living sod roof holds firm against snow loads that would collapse a poorly built cabin. And the constant temperature, cool in summer, warm in winter, creates a haven from the plains' extreme conditions. One morning in late January, after a particularly brutal night where temperatures dropped to nearly 40 below, you hear frantic pounding on your door. It's young Billy Evans from 2 miles over, his face wild with panic. "It's Pa," he gasps, breath clouding around his ice-crusted scarf. "A fire went out in the night. Can't wake him or Ma or the little ones." Your blood runs cold. You've heard of this. Entire families freezing in their sleep when their fires died. But it always happened in wooden houses, never in dugouts where the earth itself provided insulation. You grab your coat and follow Billy back to his family's claim. Unlike your dugout, the Evans family built a traditional frame house, hauling lumber at great expense from the nearest railroad town 40 miles away. It stands exposed on the prairie, no hillside to shelter it, no earth to insulate it, just thin wooden walls between life and death. Inside, the scene is grim. John Evans is blue-lipped but breathing, his wife Sarah the same. Their 3 youngest children are huddled together under every blanket the family owns, shivering violently. "They're alive," you call to Billy, who's hovering fearfully at the door. "Get a fire going. Fast." It takes hours of work, stoking the fire to blazing, heating bricks to place around the family members, brewing hot coffee that you practically pour down John's throat. Slowly, they come back from the edge. "Should have built a dugout like you," John whispers when he's finally coherent. "Too proud. Wanted a proper house like back in Pennsylvania." Later that night, back in your own snug dugout, you tell your family what happened. "We're lucky," you say simply. "In a dirt house?" your oldest son asks skeptically. "In a smart house," you correct him, "one that works with this place instead of fighting it." The winter grinds on, an endurance test unlike anything you experienced back east. February brings 3 more blizzards, each seeming worse than the last. Your family develops a routine for blizzard days. Everyone stays in, conserving heat and energy. Stories are told. Simple games are played with buttons or pebbles. Your wife teaches the children songs from her childhood. You whittle small figurines from scraps of wood, each one a precious creation given the scarcity of timber. The most surprising challenge isn't the cold or isolation, it's the darkness. With just one small window, and that often blocked by snow, your dugout exists in a perpetual twilight. Candles and lamp oil are too precious to waste during daylight hours, so everyone learns to squint, to feel their way around familiar spaces, to work by touch and memory. "I feel like a mole," your wife confesses one particularly dim afternoon, straining to mend a shirt in the meagre light from the partly obscured window. "Moles are survivors," you point out. She smiles. "So are we, apparently." By March, cabin fever has set in hard. Everyone's temper is shorter. The children bicker over nothing. The smell of unwashed bodies. Bathing is a luxury that requires heating precious water, mingles with the earthy odour of the walls and the constant scent of whatever's cooking on the small stove. "I swear," your wife mutters one day, "I can smell every single thing we've cooked since November. The walls have absorbed it all." She's not wrong. The dugout has become a repository of smells, some pleasant like the apple pie she managed to bake for Christmas using carefully hoarded dried apples, and some less so like the ever-present aroma of buffalo chip smoke or the musky scent of the dirt floor after someone tracks in melting snow. As March turns to April, the first real thaw begins, and with it comes a new challenge you hadn't anticipated: water. Not from the roof. Your careful construction with its layers of sod blocks has kept it admirably dry overhead, but from the walls themselves. As the frozen ground thaws, water begins to seep through in places, creating damp patches that grow daily. "Is the house crying?" your 4-year-old asks, touching a wet streak on the wall with fascination. "Just the snow melting," you explain, though you're worried. You recall Martha Jenkins' warning about dugout placement, how critical it was to choose the right spot with proper drainage. You spend anxious days digging trenches around your dwelling, creating channels to direct the meltwater away from your precious home. Your neighbours pitch in, appearing with shovels and advice, working alongside you because they know a housing disaster could happen to any of them. Out here, no one survives alone. "Should hold now," old Mr. Peterson declares after a day's digging. "Next year, start these trenches before the first freeze. Water always finds the easy path." As April turns to May, the prairie undergoes a transformation so dramatic it seems like magic. What was barren and white erupts into a riot of colour. Tiny wildflowers in purple, yellow and white appear everywhere, including, to everyone's delight, on your roof. "We've got a flower garden on top of our house," your daughter exclaims one morning, pointing up at the purple and yellow blooms that have emerged from your sod roof. It's the final proof of what you've suspected all along. Your home isn't just a structure on the land, it's become part of the living prairie itself. When you walk up the slight slope behind your dugout, you can step directly onto your roof, now a flourishing patch of prairie grasses and wildflowers, indistinguishable from the surrounding landscape except for the chimney pipe poking through. One warm evening, as your family sits outside enjoying the sunset and the first truly comfortable temperatures in months, Martha Jenkins stops by again. "Thinking about building a proper frame house yet?" she asks with a knowing smile. Most folks do, after surviving their first winter in a hole. You look at your dugout with its flowering roof and sturdy walls that kept your family alive through the brutal winter. You think of the Evans family, nearly lost in their proper wooden house. "I reckon we might stay put a while longer," you say. "This hole worked out just fine," Martha nods approvingly. "Smart. You know, my family lived 7 years in our first dugout, didn't build a frame house until the railroad came through and lumber got cheaper. Even then..." She pauses, looking wistful. That wooden house never did feel as safe during a storm. As the warm season takes hold, you begin to appreciate your dugout's summer virtues. While your neighbours in wooden houses swelter in the intense prairie heat, your earthen walls keep the interior a steady, cool temperature. On days when the thermometer climbs past 90 degrees, neighbours sometimes stop by just to cool off for a spell. "Like nature's own icebox," John Evans says, one particularly scorching afternoon, sipping cool water inside your dugout while sweat evaporates from his forehead. The summer brings new challenges too. Without the freezing temperatures to keep them dormant, insects become constant companions. Spiders drop from the ceiling. Beetles emerge from tiny cracks. Ants form industrious highways along the floor edges. Your wife wages a daily battle against them with a broom and determination, but eventually reaches a philosophical truce. I'll allow the spiders if they eat the flies, she declares. Everything else needs to stay in its own home. Perhaps the strangest summer development is what happens during heavy rainstorms. The first time it occurs, everyone freezes in alarm. The rain has been pounding for hours when suddenly a small cascade of water begins trickling down one wall. Is it collapsing? Your wife asks, panic in her voice. But no, the dugout remains solid. The water simply finds the path of least resistance through the thick earthen wall, creating temporary miniature waterfalls that disappear as quickly as they came when the rain stops. You learn to place buckets in the usual spots and otherwise ignore what your daughter calls the indoor rain. Better than having a wooden roof that leaks all over everything, Martha Jenkins assures you when you mention it. Besides, helps keep the dust down. By late summer, your family has developed an entirely new relationship with your home, one of mutual accommodation. You've learned to read its moods, which corner gets the most morning sun, which wall is most likely to crumble dirt onto the floor when the weather changes. Where to store food to keep it coolest, which spots to avoid during a rain. In return, it shelters you, moderates the extreme temperatures, and connects you to the land in ways you never imagined possible. One August evening, as your family sits outside enjoying the cooler air after a scorching day, your oldest son asks a question that catches you off guard. "Pa, when are we going to build a real house?" The question hangs in the air. A year ago, you would have had a quick answer. Of course, a real house was the goal, the dugout merely a temporary necessity. But now, you look at your home, with its living roof blending seamlessly into the prairie, its thick walls that have protected you through killer storms, its simple but profound wisdom. "Son," you say finally, "I reckon we already have one." As summer ripens toward autumn, your family has now lived through all 4 seasons in your dugout home. You've survived blizzards that buried half the county in snow. You've endured spring floods, summer heat, insect invasions, and everything else the prairie could throw at you, and you're still here. But more than just surviving, something else has happened. You've begun to understand this place in ways that would have been impossible in a traditional house. Living partially underground has connected you to the rhythms of the earth itself. You notice things now, how moisture moves through soil, how heat transfers through packed earth, how roots bind everything together. One crisp September morning, you're outside examining your roof, now a lush, living carpet of prairie grass dotted with the last wildflowers of the season, when you spot a wagon approaching. It's the Harrises, a family who settled about 5 miles away last spring. They built a conventional wooden frame house, hauling lumber at great expense from the railroad town 40 miles distant. Mrs. Harris looks exhausted, the children sombre and dirty. Mr. Harris steers their wagon up to your dugout and sets the brake with a weary sigh. "Twister took our house yesterday," he says without preamble, "lifted it clean off the ground and scattered it across 3 counties. "My Lord!" your wife gasps, emerging from the dugout. "Were you inside?" "Saw it coming and got to the storm cellar in time," Mrs. Harris says, her voice hollow. "Nothing left but the foundation and half the kitchen wall. Your family quickly helps them unload what few possessions they manage to salvage. As the children get settled, Mr. Harris pulls you aside. 'Never seen anything like it,' he whispers, his eyes distant. 'Sound like a freight train, sky turned green. Then our house, our whole house, just lifted up like it was made of paper.'" You nod silently. You've heard about prairie tornadoes, but haven't experienced one yourself. The locals speak of them with the same respectful fear usually reserved for biblical plagues. "We were thinking," he begins, then falters. "That is, Sarah and I were wondering if you might help us build a dugout, like yours." He looks at his feet, embarrassed. I was too proud before, thought dugouts were for poor folks who couldn't afford proper houses. Dugouts are for smart folks who want to stay alive, you correct him gently. The next morning, a surprising number of neighbours arrive to help the Harrises. They bring shovels, picks, a borrowed plough for cutting sod, and food for everyone working. Even families who live in wooden houses themselves come to help build a dugout. They understand that out here, community survival trumps individual pride. You watch with quiet satisfaction as John Evans, who nearly lost his family in the winter cold, works alongside everyone else, showing the Harrises exactly how to angle their dugout into a south-facing slope. Gotta think about where the winter sun hits, he explains, already a convert to dugout wisdom. And where water'll drain come spring thaw. The children are put to work too, carrying smaller tools, fetching water for the workers, and gathering buffalo chips to fuel the cooking fire. Your own children have become experts at identifying the best dried dung, not too fresh, not too old, with just the right density for slow burning. Gross, whispers little Emma Harris when your daughter hands her a prime specimen. Your daughter just shrugs. Better than freezing. Or getting blown to Missouri. By midday, the outline of the Harrises' new home has been marked and the serious digging begins. Men take turns with the heavy picks, breaking up the dense prairie soil. Women and older children form a bucket brigade to haul the loosened earth away. Younger children are tasked with gathering any roots or rocks that might be useful. As you work, you realise how much knowledge your community has collectively developed about these earth shelters. Everyone has their own tricks and techniques. Old Mr. Peterson insists on testing soil by squeezing it in his fist. Too sandy, it'll crumble, he declares. Too clayey, it'll crack when it dries. Martha Jenkins demonstrates how to properly cut sod blocks for maximum strength. Got to get that root layer in the right spot, she explains to Mrs. Harris. That's what holds everything together. You find yourself sharing wisdom you didn't even realise you'd acquired. About roof construction, about wall finishing, about proper chimney placement. Knowledge born not from books or formal training, but from a year of intimate living with the earth itself. The work is exhausting but progresses with surprising speed. Many hands make light work, as your mother used to say. By sundown, the basic excavation is complete, a rectangular pit dug horizontally into the hillside, roughly 15 by 20 feet, larger than your own dugout. Bigger family, bigger house, Martha says with approval. As people begin packing up to head home, you notice Mrs. Harris staring at the hole in the ground with a mix of gratitude and apprehension. It doesn't look like much yet, you tell her gently, but in a few weeks it'll be the safest home on the prairie. She nods, tears in her eyes. Thank you, all of you. We'd be heading back east right now if not for this help. That's how it works out here, your wife says, putting an arm around her shoulders. Last winter, the Jenkinses shared their flour when we ran out. Spring thaw, we helped the Petersons dig drainage trenches. Now we all help you. And someday you'll help someone else, Martha adds. That's the only way any of us make it. The next few weeks are a flurry of activity as the whole community pitches in to complete the Harrises' dugout before winter sets in. The men cut and haul the precious few wooden beams needed for the roof structure. Women organise the interior layout, advising Mrs. Harris on the most practical arrangements for cooking, sleeping and storage in the confined space. The children, meanwhile, have turned the whole process into an elaborate game. They compete to find the largest intact roots when digging, earning imaginary points for their teams. They race to see who can carry sod blocks the fastest without dropping them. They make up songs about dirt houses that have everyone laughing despite the back-breaking work. I never knew living in a hole could be so complicated, Mr. Harris remarks one day as he helps lay the roof beams. Back east, you just stack logs one on top of the other. Complicated but smarter, John Evans replies. My wooden house used 30 trees. Took me months to cut them all. Your house. He gestures at the emerging dugout. Using about 5 trees total, and the rest is all right here under our feet. You've been thinking about this same idea, how dugouts represent a fundamentally different relationship with the environment. Eastern settlers came from places of abundance. Thick forests provided endless building materials. But here, in this treeless ocean of grass, that approach failed catastrophically. Success required adaptation, innovation, and humility. By early October, the Harris' dugout is nearly complete and just in time. The first cold snap hits with a vengeance, dropping temperatures from pleasant to bone-chilling in a matter of hours. But inside their new earth home, the family stays comfortable with just a small fire. It's like magic, Mrs. Harris tells your wife during her next visit. Outside, it's freezing, but in here, it's just not. Wait till summer, your wife replies. When everyone else is sweltering, you'll be cool as a cellar. The completion of the Harris' home calls for a celebration, and Martha Jenkins organises a housewarming, though as she jokes, a hole in the ground doesn't need much warming. Everyone brings what food they can spare, creating an impressive feast by frontier standards. Someone even produces a fiddle, and soon the new dugout is filled with music and dancing. As you watch your neighbours laughing and celebrating inside the earth shelter they collectively built, you realise something profound has happened over this past year. You've all become more than just scattered homesteaders trying to survive individually. You've become a true community, bound together by shared knowledge and mutual dependence. And the humble dugout, this primitive dwelling that most Easterners would scoff at, has been at the centre of it all. Never thought I'd be dancing in a dirt house, John Evans says, pausing to catch his breath after a lively reel. Never thought I'd be alive to dance anywhere after last winter, his wife replies with pointed look as the party winds down and families begin heading home through the crisp autumn night. Mr. Harris stops you by the door. I've been thinking about something, he says, his voice low. These dugouts, they're not just good for weather, they're good for other things too. You raise an eyebrow. Indians, he explains, bandits, anyone looking to cause trouble, can't burn what's made of dirt, can't easily find what's built into a hillside. You nod slowly. It's something you've considered as well. The Great Plains weren't empty when settlers arrived. Indigenous peoples who had lived here for generations understandably resented the newcomers. While relations were peaceful in your area for now, tensions existed everywhere. My cousin's settlement in Kansas, Harris continues. 3 families got raided last spring, all wooden houses, all visible for miles, standing up like targets. But dugouts just disappear into the landscape, you finish his thought. Exactly. From a distance, all you see is prairie. It's yet another unexpected advantage of the dugout design, not just protection from the elements, but strategic concealment as well. The only giveaway is the smoke from the chimney, and even that can be managed with careful fire tending. As winter approaches again, your family makes improvements to your dugout based on last year's experiences. You add a small vestibule at the entrance to block wind and retain heat. Your wife devises a better storage system for food, utilizing niches cut directly into the walls. The children help gather extra buffalo chips, creating an impressive fuel stockpile. You also add a crucial new feature, a small root cellar dug even deeper into the hill behind your main room. With careful planning, this cool, dark space will keep potatoes, carrots, apples, and preserved vegetables from freezing or spoiling. We won't go hungry this winter, your wife says, with satisfaction as she arranges jars of pickled beans and sacks of potatoes in the new cellar. The entire community prepares together, sharing knowledge and resources. Those with successful gardens distribute extra produce. Hunting parties bring back deer and prairie chickens, which the women smoke and preserve. Even the children contribute, gathering wild berries and herbs under Martha's watchful guidance. By November, your dugout has evolved considerably from the simple hole you first excavated. The walls have been smoothed and whitewashed with a mixture of lime and water, making the interior surprisingly bright. Floor areas have been covered with braided rag rugs where possible. The ceiling has been lined with canvas to catch falling dirt and insects. Most importantly, you've added a second tiny window on the east wall, carefully framed with precious glass hauled from town. This small addition transforms the interior, allowing morning light to penetrate the space and making the single room feel less confining. "It's starting to feel like a proper home," your wife says one evening as she serves a stew made from root vegetables and preserved meat. "Better than proper," you reply. "It's a prairie home." As the first serious snow falls, blanketing the landscape in white, your family gathers around the small table for dinner. Outside, the temperature has plummeted to well below zero. The wind howls with predatory intensity, but inside your earth-sheltered dwelling, wrapped in the insulating embrace of the prairie itself, you remain warm and protected. Your oldest son, who once asked when you'd build a real house, now proudly shows the Harris children how to repair cracks in the walls with a mixture of clay and grass. Your daughters have become experts at managing the tricky dugout stove, knowing exactly how many buffalo chips to add for baking versus simmering. Even your wife, who initially viewed the dugout as a primitive necessity, now speaks of our cozy nest with genuine affection. One especially bitter December night, as a blizzard rages outside with frightening intensity, your family sits together playing a game of checkers using buttons and a board scratched onto a piece of scrap wood. The wind occasionally sends haunting moans down the chimney, but otherwise, the dugout is remarkably quiet compared to the fury outside. "Remember last year when we first moved in?" your wife asks, smiling at the memory. "How we all huddled together that first night, sure the roof would collapse on us. Or how you screamed when that field mouse ran across your foot," your daughter adds with a giggle. "I still don't like the mice," your wife admits, "but I've made peace with them. They were here first after all." That night, as your family sleeps soundly while the blizzard continues its assault, you lie awake thinking about how much has changed, not just the physical structure of your home, but your entire relationship with this challenging landscape. When you first arrived on the prairie, you saw it as something to be conquered, tamed, forced into submission. You planned to impose your Eastern ways upon it, to make it conform to your expectations. The dugout was meant to be a temporary concession, a brief compromise until you could build a civilized house. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. You stopped fighting the prairie and started listening to it. You learned its rhythms, respected its power, adapted to its demands. And in return, it sheltered you, taught you, even welcomed you. Your dugout isn't a surrender or a compromise. It's a collaboration with the land itself, a partnership, perhaps even a friendship. Outside, the wind continues to howl. Inside, protected by earth and ingenuity, your family sleeps in perfect safety, having discovered what the indigenous peoples of these plains always knew. True wisdom comes not from dominating nature, but from becoming part of it. As you finally drift towards sleep, you realize that your dugout has given you something no conventional house ever could. Not just shelter from the elements, but a profound new understanding of what home really means. The winter passes more comfortably than your first one on the prairie. In large part because you've learned the rhythms of dugout life. By January, your family has established routines that would baffle most Easterners but make perfect sense for underground living on the treeless plains. Each morning begins with the most essential task, rebuilding the fire in the small cast-iron stove. This responsibility rotates among family members old enough to handle it safely. Today, it's your turn. You open the stove door carefully, scrape out the fine grey ash from yesterday's buffalo chips, and place it in a bucket for later use. The ash will be mixed with fat to make soap, or used as an abrasive cleaning powder for stubborn pots. You arrange a small pile of dried prairie grass as tinder, add a few buffalo chip fragments, and strike a precious match. As the fire catches, you add larger chips, arranging them to burn slowly. The distinct earthy smell fills the dugout. Not pleasant exactly, but familiar and reassuring. It means warmth, safety, life. Pa, there's frost on my blanket again. Your youngest calls from his sleeping pallet. That means you're breathing good and strong, you reply with a smile. Using the explanation Martha Jenkins taught you means you're alive. In truth, the condensation that forms every night remains one of the dugout's few unsolvable challenges. No matter how well built, the temperature difference between body heat and the cool earth ceiling creates moisture that collects and sometimes freezes. Your family has adapted. Blankets are shaken out each morning, bedding rearranged to dry during the day. As the stove warms the single room, your wife joins you, already calculating the day's water usage. This is perhaps the greatest daily challenge. Every drop must be hauled from the creek half a mile away, a brutally difficult task in winter. Your family has learned extreme conservation, using and reusing water in a carefully planned sequence. I need to wash the cooking pots today, she muses. Then that water can be used for the floor and after that for the garden planning. The mention of garden planning brightens everyone's mood. In the depths of winter, thoughts of spring planting provide necessary hope. Your wife has been studying seed catalogues by candlelight, determining what vegetables will grow best in the harsh prairie conditions. Once the snow clears enough to see the ground, she says, serving a breakfast of cornmeal mush, I want to try that root cellar method the Petersons told us about, planting directly into mounds over a dugout storage space. Sounds like we're turning the whole prairie into one big dugout, you joke. Why not? Your oldest son responds seriously. It works, doesn't it? After breakfast, the daily maintenance begins. Living in a dugout requires constant, careful attention. Your oldest daughter sweeps the packed earth floor with a broom made from prairie grass bound tightly with twine. Your son checks the roof beams for any signs of stress or shifting. Your wife inspects the walls for new cracks that might need patching. Every few days she mixes a paste of fine clay and water to repair these inevitable fissures. It's a never-ending task. The earth house is alive in a way wooden structures aren't, constantly shifting, settling, responding to temperature and moisture changes. Found another mouse tunnel, your son calls from near the food storage area. This initiates a well-practiced response. Everyone helps move containers and furniture while you locate both entry and exit points of the tunnel. You pack them with a mixture of clay and crushed glass, a technique Martha Jenkins swears by. They won't dig through the sharp bits, she'd explained. The mice are persistent adversaries in dugout living. They were here long before humans arrived and seem to view your home as simply an extension of their underground domain. It's a constant battle, but one fought with a certain respect. After all, they survived on these plains for centuries before you arrived. By mid-morning, the daily chores are complete, and the dugout has reached its most pleasant temperature, warm enough for comfort but not so hot that the stove makes the small space stifling. This is the time for productivity. Today, you're working on an innovation, a small fold-down table attached to the wall. Lumber is precious on the plains, so you've scavenged boards from packing crates, carefully removing nails for reuse. Tools are equally scarce. Your entire collection consists of a hand saw with several missing teeth, a hammer with a loose head wrapped with wire to keep it attached, a draw knife for shaping wood, and a drill created by attaching a sharpened metal rod to a wooden handle. Necessity mother's invention, your father used to say. Out here, that saying takes on powerful meaning. While you work, your wife teaches the children their letters and numbers. Education continues despite isolation, perhaps even more crucial because of it. Books are among your most valued possessions, read and reread until nearly memorized. Paper is precious too, used sparingly for writing practice, then repurposed for everything from patterns to kindling. The afternoon brings visitors, John and Sarah Evans, bringing news and mail collected from their trip to town. Roads are finally clear enough to get through, John announces, stamping snow from his boots in the small entryway you added to create an airlock of sorts. The children crowd around as Sarah distributes letters and a newspaper, already 3 weeks old but still treasured for its connection to the wider world. Got something else too, John says with unusual excitement. He reaches into his coat and produces a small book, almanac for this year, has growing information specific to this territory. This is a genuinely valuable gift. The standard farming knowledge from back east often proves disastrously wrong for prairie conditions. Local specific information can mean the difference between harvest and hunger. Town's got 3 new families arrived, Sarah reports as she accepts a cup of hot tea, a luxury reserved for special occasions, all asking about dugouts, words spreading about how they stand up to the weather. John nods. That twister that took our place made folks think twice about frame houses. That and the Thompsons' place burning down last month when their chimney caught the wall on fire. Can't set dirt on fire, you observe. Exactly what I told 'em, John agrees. The conversation turns to spring preparations. John has been experimenting with a new plough design better suited to the dense prairie sod. Sarah and your wife exchange information about which garden seeds performed best last year. This is how knowledge evolves on the frontier, not from books or formal education, but through direct experience shared among neighbours. Each family contributes their discoveries, failures, and successes to a growing body of prairie wisdom. After the Evanses leave, promising to return the favour with an invitation once the weather improves further, your family settles into the evening routine. The dugout's limited space requires careful choreography as dinner preparations begin. Children clear away daytime activities, rearranging the minimal furniture to create a cooking area. Your wife manages the stove with practiced skill, knowing exactly how to adjust the damper for different cooking needs. Tonight's meal is a stew of preserved vegetables, dried meat, and precious salt. The dugout fills with savoury smells that partially mask the ever-present earthy aroma of the walls and floor. Steam from the cooking pot adds welcome moisture to the winter-dry air. Feels like a proper home now, your wife observes as the family gathers around to eat. Better than proper, your oldest son replies, echoing your words from months ago. It's a prairie home. After dinner comes perhaps the most peaceful time in dugout life. Lantern light creates a warm glow that softens the humble surroundings. The family gravitates toward the stove's warmth. Your wife mends clothing. You carve a simple toy from a scrap of wood. The children play quiet games or listen as you read aloud from one of the few books. Tonight, it's a chapter from Robinson Crusoe, particularly fitting for your isolated prairie existence. The parallels aren't lost on anyone. Like Crusoe, you've had to reimagine survival using only the resources at hand. Like him, you've created a home from the raw materials of an unfamiliar landscape. Read the part about his cave house again, your youngest requests, and you turn back a few pages to the description of Crusoe's shelter dug into the hillside. See? Your oldest daughter says. Even on his island, he figured out that going into the earth made the most sense. As bedtime approaches, the careful rearrangement begins again. Sleeping pallets unfold from against the walls, blankets and quilts emerge from storage trunks. The fire is back to last through the night with minimal attention. I miss having my own bedroom sometimes, your teenage daughter admits as she arranges her sleeping space. I don't, her younger sister replies. It's like we're all wrapped up together like peas in a pod. A dirt pod, someone jokes, and everyone laughs. This shared humour about your living situation has become an important part of frontier survival. The ability to find amusement in hardship, to laugh at the very real challenges you face, provides essential psychological resilience. On the prairie, a sense of humour isn't a luxury, it's a survival tool. As the family settles for the night, the dugout offers its greatest gift, a profound, encompassing quiet found nowhere else. Outside, the wind might howl with manic intensity. Inside, protected by feet of earth, you hear only the occasional crackle from the stove and the soft breathing of your family. This cocoon-like feeling of being held safely within the earth while winter rages outside creates a unique form of comfort no frame house could provide. It's primal, connecting you to ancient human experiences of cave shelters and earth lodges used by people across time. The next morning brings an unexpected visitor. Martha Jenkins arrives early, stamping snow from her boots and unwrapping layers of scarves from her face. "Need to borrow your man," she announces to your wife without preamble. "My roof's starting to sag in one corner. Need a strong back and someone who knows dugout construction." Within minutes, you're bundled up and following Martha across the snow-covered prairie to her dugout, about a mile away. The problem is immediately apparent. A section of her roof has begun to sink, creating a worrying depression in the otherwise even surface. "Been adding too much snow weight," Martha explains as you examine the problem. "Didn't brush it off regular like I should have." Inside, the issue becomes clearer. One of the supporting poles has cracked, causing the roof structure to settle. It's not immediately dangerous, but needs addressing before spring thaws add water weight to the already stressed roof. "Got a cottonwood trunk I've been saving for fence posts," Martha says. "Reckon we can split it and brace that beam?" Together, you work out a solution, using Martha's precious wood supply to create a support structure that will hold until more extensive repairs can be made in warmer weather. The work is cramped and awkward in the small space, but by midday, the immediate danger is resolved. "Thanks," Martha says simply, serving a lunch of cornbread and bean soup as reward for your labour. Not many folks around who really understand how these dirt houses work. Learning more every day, you admit, sometimes the hard way. Martha nods. That's frontier living for you, school of hard knocks and no holidays. On your walk home, you reflect on how much specialized knowledge you've acquired about these unique dwellings. A year ago, the concept of a dugout was foreign, even primitive in your mind. Now you understand subtleties about soil composition, drainage patterns, roof loading, and ventilation that no Eastern carpenter would ever need to consider. This expertise isn't written in any manual or taught in any school. It's hard-won through experience, trial and error, and community knowledge sharing. You've become something new out here. Not quite a builder in the traditional sense, but a kind of earth shelter specialist adapted specifically to prairie conditions. As spring approaches, your family begins the seasonal transition of dugout living. The winter accumulation of soot, dust, and general grime necessitates a thorough cleaning. Every item must be removed, the walls scrubbed with soap made from ashes and fat, the floor sprinkled with water, and swept until it regains its hardened surface. The roof requires particular attention. The winter's weight of snow has compressed the sod blocks and prairie grass insulation. In places, the dirt has shifted, creating small gaps. These must be carefully filled and patched before spring rains arrive. It's like the house has been hibernating all winter and now it's waking up, your daughter observes as she helps with the cleaning. It's an apt description. The dugout does seem to go through seasonal changes, almost like a living organism. In winter, it contracts against the cold, sealing itself tightly. In spring, it expands subtly, breathing with the increasing warmth and moisture. The most dramatic transformation occurs on the roof. As temperatures warm, the dormant prairie grasses that form your living roof begin to green up. Within weeks, your home becomes nearly invisible from a distance, just another gentle rise in the prairie landscape, crowned with waving grass and wild flowers. This natural camouflage provides more than aesthetic benefits. It makes your dwelling virtually invisible to anyone more than 100 yards away, an important security feature in uncertain times. It also creates a natural habitat for birds, butterflies, and small prairie animals who sometimes startle the family by scurrying across what sounds like the ceiling but is actually just the roof. "There goes the roof rabbit again" becomes a common phrase as spring progresses. The warming weather also allows for an expansion of living space. The area immediately outside your dugout becomes an outdoor room where many daily activities relocate. Cooking often moves to an exterior fire pit to keep the dugout cool. Laundry, crafts, and lessons happen in the open air after months of confinement. This seasonal breathing, contracting into the sheltered dugout during winter's harshest months, then expanding outward as weather permits, creates a natural rhythm to prairie life that follows the weather rather than fighting against it. One mild April evening, as your family enjoys dinner outside for the first time that year, you notice riders approaching from the east, unusual enough to cause immediate alert. As they come closer, you recognize the territory marshal and two deputies. "Evening, folks," the marshal calls as they rein in their horses. "Don't mean to interrupt your meal." You invite them to join you, and your wife quickly arranges extra plates. The real purpose of their visit soon emerges between bites of food. "Been seeing more trouble with bandits up north," the marshal explains, "hitting isolated farms, especially the obvious targets." "Obvious targets?" you ask. Frame houses, visible for miles, easy to spot, easy to approach unseen. He gestures at your nearly invisible dugout. "Not like this. Smart setup you got here. They'd ride right past without even knowing there's a family dwelling. After the lawmen depart, promising to check in again on their next circuit, your family discusses this unexpected benefit of dugout living. The strategic advantages of your earth-sheltered home add another layer of appreciation for its design. So we're not just protected from blizzards and tornadoes, your son summarizes, but from two-legged threats too. That night, as your family settles into sleep, you find yourself listening to the subtle sounds of your dugout home, the occasional soft patter of dirt falling from a root in the ceiling, the gentle creak of a roof beam adjusting to the day's temperature change, the barely perceptible whisper of air through the chimney. After nearly 2 years of living partially underground, these sounds no longer signal danger or discomfort. They've become the familiar heartbeat of your prairie home, as reassuring as the creaks of a wooden house were back east. You've changed too, adapting alongside your dwelling. You've developed new skills, new knowledge, and a new relationship with the environment. The prairie is no longer an adversary to be conquered, but a partner whose patterns you've learned to respect and work within. Your dugout isn't just somewhere you live, it's become an extension of this partnership, a physical embodiment of the lessons the Great Plains have taught you about survival, adaptation, and the wisdom of working with nature rather than against it. As spring fully establishes itself on the prairie, your dugout home undergoes its own transformation. The living roof, dormant during winter, erupts into a miniature prairie ecosystem. Native grasses grow tall, wildflowers bloom in surprising bursts of colour, and small creatures make their home in this elevated meadow. Our house is wearing a flower crown, your youngest declares one morning, delighted by the purple and yellow blooms dotting the roof. The dugout's relationship with the seasons becomes increasingly apparent as you approach your second full year of underground living. What began as a desperate survival measure has evolved into a sophisticated dwelling uniquely suited to the harsh realities of prairie life. One warm May afternoon, a wagon approaches your homestead. It carries a family you don't recognize, newcomers to the territory, their belongings piled high, their faces showing the weariness of long travel. Begging your pardon, calls the man, pulling his team to a halt. Folks in town said we should talk to folks who've built dugouts before starting our own. His eyes scan your property, confusion evident. They said to look for the Jenkins place. Your wife laughs. That's Martha, about a mile east, but you're welcome to look at ours while you're here. The man seems perplexed, still looking around for a visible house. His wife nudges him and points to your dugout entrance built into the hillside, nearly invisible among the spring growth. That's your home? He asks incredulously. Going on 2 years now, you confirm with a hint of pride. The family, the Williamsons, you learn, climbs down from their wagon and you invite them inside. Their reaction is familiar. First surprise at stepping down into the earth, then amazement at the comfortable interior, followed by a flood of practical questions. Mrs. Williamson runs her hand along the whitewashed wall. It's not damp at all. I thought it would feel like a cellar. Gets a bit damp during spring thaw, your wife admits, but nothing terrible if you've dug in the right spot with good drainage. Mr. Williamson examines your roof beams with professional interest. I was a carpenter back in Ohio, built plenty of frame houses, never imagined living underground. Most of us didn't, you acknowledge. Necessity teaches new tricks. The Williamsons' 5 children, meanwhile, are fascinated by the concept of a house built into the earth. Like a rabbit warren, exclaims one, earning a stern look from his mother. More like the smart little pig who built his house to keep the wolf out, you suggest, making the children giggle. What strikes you during their visit is how much specialized knowledge you now possess about this form of dwelling, knowledge you didn't have and couldn't have acquired back east. When the Williamsons ask about site selection, you find yourself explaining soil composition tests, drainage patterns, and sun angles with the confidence of an expert. Clay soil holds too much water, you explain. Sandy soil won't hold its shape. You want something in between, with enough root structure to bind it together. Your wife chimes in about interior considerations, how to finish walls, how to manage moisture, how to arrange living space for maximum efficiency in the confined area. The biggest challenge is keeping it clean, she confides to Mrs. Williamson. Dirt walls make dirt. That's just the truth of it, but you learn tricks. After showing them around your dugout and answering their many questions, you harness your team to ride with Mr. Williamson to examine potential building sites on their newly claimed land. This has become something of a community service, experienced dugout dwellers helping newcomers choose proper locations. A poorly sited dugout could mean misery or even death during extreme weather. As you ride across the prairie with Williamson, you point out features that would have been meaningless to you 2 years ago but now seem obvious. See how the water naturally channels there after a rain. You don't want to be downhill from that. Notice the south-facing slope there. Gets good sun all day in winter. That's what you want. Feel how the soil crumbles in your hand. Too sandy here. Won't hold a good wall. Williamson studies you with growing respect. You've learned a lot about dirt, he observes. You laugh. Had to. Out here, dirt isn't just what you grow things in or what gets on your boots. It's what stands between your family and freezing to death. By day's end, you've helped the Williamsons identify 2 promising locations for their dugout. As you prepare to return home, Williamson asks the question you've heard many times now. Is it really just temporary? Everyone says to build a proper house once you can afford lumber. You consider your response carefully. 2 years ago, you would have said yes without hesitation. Now you're less certain. Some folks move to frame houses when they can, you acknowledge. Status thing, I suppose. But more of us are staying put than you might expect. There's something about these earth homes that grows on you. On the ride back, you reflect on how the community's relationship with dugouts has evolved. What began as emergency shelters born of desperation have, for many families, become permanent homes chosen for their practical advantages. The unique benefits, natural insulation, storm protection, tornado resistance, low cost, and strategic concealment, outweigh the drawbacks for many prairie settlers. When you return home, you find your wife has invited the Williamson family to stay the night, as it's too late to begin construction on their own shelter. This kind of hospitality is common on the frontier, where travelers might otherwise face dangerous nights exposed to the elements. Accommodating 7 extra people in your modest dugout requires creative arrangement, but everyone finds a space. The children think it a grand adventure to sleep on pallets arranged like puzzle pieces across the floor. After dinner, a stew stretched to feed more mouths than intended. The conversation turns to life on the prairie. The Williamsons are full of questions about crops, weather, supplies, and social opportunities. "What about church?" Mrs. Williamson asks, concern evident in her voice. "Circuit preacher comes through every 6 weeks or so," your wife explains. "Services rotate between homes. When it's in a dugout, it's cozy to say the least. And schooling? Community school meets in the Jenkins Soddy. It's the biggest. 3 months winter, 3 months summer. Rest of the time, parents teach what they can." As the evening progresses, you realize how much your community has developed in just 2 years. What began as scattered, isolated homesteaders has evolved into an interconnected network of families who share resources, knowledge, and support. The humble dugouts, far from being symbols of poverty or failure, have become the centers of this emerging prairie society. The next morning, the entire settlement turns out to help the Williamsons begin their dugout. Men arrive with shovels and picks, women bring food for the workers, children carry water and smaller tools. Even those families who live in frame houses participate. The ethic of mutual aid transcends dwelling types. The work proceeds with remarkable efficiency, the product of accumulated community knowledge. When Mr. Peterson and John Evans disagree about the best angle for the roof beams, they discuss the merits of their different approaches rather than simply following tradition. When Martha Jenkins suggests a new technique for waterproofing the walls with a lime-based plaster, others listen attentively to her reasoning. This is how frontier knowledge evolves, through practical experience, shared information, trial and error, and collaborative problem solving. Within 2 days, the Williamsons' basic dugout structure is complete, not fully finished inside, but enclosed and secure enough for the family to move in. As you help set the final roof beams, you notice something that hadn't been part of your own construction process. Mr. Williamson, with his carpenter's background, has introduced improved joinery techniques that make the roof structure significantly stronger. That's clever, you observe as he creates a notched joint that locks the beams together. Timber framing method from back east, he explains. Figure it works with these cottonwood poles too. Mind if I copy that design when I reinforce my roof this summer? That's the idea, he grins. I learn about dirt from you, you learn about wood from me. This exchange typifies the evolution of dugout construction on the prairie. Each new settler brings knowledge from their previous life, adapts it to current conditions, and adds to the collective wisdom. A technique that works is quickly adopted throughout the community. One that fails is just as quickly abandoned. The result is a rapidly developing vernacular architecture uniquely suited to the specific challenges of the Great Plains, an architectural form that exists nowhere else and serves needs unique to this environment. By late afternoon, the Williamsons' dugout has reached the stage where the family can complete the remaining work themselves. Neighbours begin heading home, satisfied with the day's accomplishment. Before departing, Martha Jenkins performs what has become something of a ritual for new dugout dwellings. She presents the family with a small jar of seeds. Prairie flowers, she explains to Mrs. Williamson. For your roof, plant them once the sod takes root. Makes it feel more like home when your house grows flowers. This simple gesture encapsulates the changed relationship between settlers and their dugouts. No longer merely expedient shelters, they have become homes to be adorned, improved, and personalized. As summer progresses, your family continues to refine your dugout dwelling. Your son helps you implement Williamson's improved roof beam design, strengthening the structure against the possibility of heavy snow loads next winter. Your wife experiments with new wall finishes, applying a mixture of lime, sand, and clay that hardens into a smoother surface less prone to crumbling. The biggest improvement comes from an idea shared by a family newly arrived from Scandinavian immigrant communities farther north. A separate entrance vestibule extended farther out from the main dugout, creating a transitional space that serves multiple purposes. It provides additional protection from wind and weather, creates valuable storage space, and serves as a mudroom where dirty boots and clothing can be removed before entering the main living area. Building this addition becomes a family project spanning several weeks. You dig the extension carefully, matching the floor height to the existing structure. Your older children help cut and place sod blocks for the low exterior walls. Your wife designs clever storage solutions for the cramped space. Wall pegs for hanging tools, shelves for frequently used items, a bench for sitting while removing boots. When complete, this modest addition transforms your daily life in unexpected ways. The main room stays cleaner without the constant influx of prairie dust from the doorway. The extra space, though small, reduces the feeling of confinement during bad weather. The improved entrance design significantly reduces drafts and heat loss during door openings. It's like having a whole new room, your wife declares happily as she arranges her cooking utensils on the newly constructed wall shelf in the vestibule. This constant improvement, this ongoing refinement of the dugout concept has become a hallmark of prairie settlement. Each family contributes ideas. Each season brings new challenges to solve. Each year adds to the collective knowledge of earth-sheltered living. By midsummer, your settlement has grown to 15 families, roughly evenly divided between dugouts and frame houses. What's interesting is how the strict social hierarchy that might have existed back east, with the proper house dwellers looking down on the dugout people, never materializes. The practical advantages of each housing type in different situations are too obvious to ignore. Frame houses offer more space, more light, and more familiar surroundings. Dugouts provide superior protection from weather extremes, better security from potential threats, and significant cost savings. Each family makes their choice based on their specific needs, resources, and priorities, rather than simple status concerns. Depends what scares you more, John Evans observes during a community barn raising, tornadoes or sealing dirt in your soup. When the circuit preacher arrives for his bi-monthly services, the entire settlement gathers at the Jenkins' large sod house. The distinction between dwelling types seems completely irrelevant as families share news, children play together, and community bonds strengthen. After the religious service comes a community meal where each family contributes what they can. The conversation flows easily between topics practical and philosophical, current challenges with grasshoppers threatening crops, a child's recent illness and recovery, plans for expanding the community school, the meaning of scripture passages in frontier context. As twilight approaches, someone produces a fiddle and impromptu dancing begins in the cleared space outside. The music drifts across the prairie, a sound of human joy and community in the vast, often silent landscape. Watching your children dance with others from the settlement, you reflect on how much has changed since your arrival. The land that once seemed alien and hostile has become home. The primitive shelter that once seemed a desperate compromise has evolved into a sophisticated dwelling uniquely adapted to prairie conditions. The scattered strangers who once eyed each other with cautious uncertainty have become an interdependent community. Late that night, returning to your dugout under a sky blazing with stars, your youngest child half asleep in your arms, you feel a profound sense of belonging, not despite your earth-sheltered home, but because of it. The dugout, far from being a step backward from civilization, represents something new and important. Humans adapting to their environment rather than forcing the environment to adapt to them. As you lay your child down on his sleeping pallet and prepare for bed yourself, you run your hand along the smooth earthen wall of your home. It's cool to the touch despite the summer heat outside, one of the dugout's many practical gifts. Thinking deep thoughts? Your wife whispers, noticing your contemplative mood. Just thinking about how much this place has taught us, you reply. How much we've had to unlearn to survive here. She nods in understanding. Back east, we'd have called this primitive. Now it just seems smart. Outside, an owl calls, a prairie sentinel announcing the full arrival of night. Inside your earth-sheltered home, surrounded by family, protected by the very soil of this challenging land, you feel a deep, unexpected contentment. The dugout has become more than shelter. It's become a philosophy, a relationship with the environment, a statement about how humans might live in harmony with even the most demanding landscapes, not by conquering them, but by becoming part of them. Years pass, prairie seasons cycle through their extremes, brutal winters, muddy springs, sweltering summers, golden autumns. Your family's dugout evolves alongside you, adapting and improving with each passing season. By your third year on the plains, the distinction between your dwelling and your family has begun to blur. The dugout has become almost like another family member, one with moods, needs, and gifts all its own. You've learned to read its subtle signals, the specific way the air feels before condensation will form on the walls, the slight musty scent that precedes a roof leak, the changing quality of light through the seasons. The house feels restless today, your wife might observe before a storm, noting how the air pressure changes create almost imperceptible shifts in the earth walls. What began as a desperate survival shelter has transformed into something approaching a partnership between your family and the very land itself. The dugout protects you. You maintain it. The relationship feels almost symbiotic, each sustaining the other through the extreme conditions of prairie life. One cool autumn evening, as your family sits outside enjoying the sunset, a daily ritual whenever weather permits, Martha Jenkins stops by. Now in her 70s, she's become something of an elder stateswoman in the growing settlement, her knowledge of dugout construction and maintenance sought by everyone from new arrivals to established families. Making any changes before winter sets in? She asks, settling her bones carefully onto a bench your son constructed from sod blocks and planks. Thinking of expanding the root cellar, you reply. Last winter's storage wasn't quite enough. Martha nods approvingly. Smart. Underground storage makes more sense than above. Stays cool in summer, never freezes in winter. She runs her hand along the earthen bench. You know, when I first came out here 30 years ago, folks thought these dirt houses were just temporary, something to endure until you could build proper. What changed your mind? Your wife asks, passing Martha a cup of tea. The old woman smiles, lines deepening around her eyes. Winter of 58, blizzard lasted 9 days straight. Temperature dropped to 40 below. When it finally cleared, half the wooden houses had people frozen inside them. Not a single dugout family lost. She sips her tea. That's when I decided temporary might just mean for as long as I live here. Your oldest son, now approaching adulthood, joins the conversation. The Wilsons are building that new design. Half dugout, half frame. Best of both, they say. Martha snorts dismissively. Fancy nonsense. Either commit to the earth or build above it. Those hybrids get the worst of both. Dampness below, wind vulnerability above. This ongoing evolution of prairie architecture has become a constant topic of discussion in your community. As railroad expansion makes milled lumber more available and affordable, many families face decisions about whether to upgrade to frame houses or continue refining their earth-sheltered dwellings. Your own family has chosen continuous improvement rather than replacement. Each year brings new modifications to your dugout home. The living space has expanded gradually through careful excavation of adjacent areas. The root cellar has nearly doubled in size. The entrance vestibule has been enlarged and improved with better drainage and storage. Interior comforts have increased as well. What began as bare earth walls now feature a smooth plaster finish made from a locally developed mixture of clay, lime, and fine prairie grass. The packed dirt floor has been partially replaced with flat stones in high traffic areas. Furniture that was once crude and purely functional has been gradually replaced with more carefully crafted pieces as time permits. Windows, once a luxury limited to a single small opening, now include 3 carefully positioned openings that maximize natural light while minimizing heat loss. Glass remains precious on the frontier, but your family prioritized this improvement after the first 2 winters demonstrated how profoundly darkness affected everyone's mood. Light matters more than space, your wife had insisted, and she was right. The additional windows transformed the psychological experience of dugout living. Even with these improvements, certain challenges remain constant. Moisture management continues to require vigilance, especially during seasonal transitions. Unwelcome wildlife, from insects to rodents to the occasional snake, must be regularly evicted. The fine dust that inevitably sifts from earthen surfaces requires constant cleaning. Yet these challenges no longer feel like hardships to be endured. They've become simply the natural rhythms of your chosen lifestyle, no different from the seasonal tasks that any housing would require. Think we'll ever build a frame house? Your teenage daughter asks one evening as the family works together on winter preparations. The question hangs in the air. 5 years ago, the answer would have been an immediate yes. Of course, you would build a proper house as soon as resources permitted. Now, you're not so certain. Why would we? Your youngest responds before you can answer. This is home. His simple statement captures something profound. The dugout, once viewed as a primitive necessity, has become deeply intertwined with your family's identity and experience of the prairie. Its earthy scent, its solid security during storms, its connection to the landscape, all have become not just accepted but valued aspects of your life. What do you think? You ask your wife later that night, after the children are asleep. She considers the question carefully. 5 years ago, I dreamed of a big white farmhouse with a proper parlour and separate bedrooms. She looks around at the humble dugout that has sheltered your family through so much. But now, this feels right somehow, like we're part of this place, not just sitting on top of it. The philosophy embodied in dugout living has seeped into other aspects of prairie life as well. Farming methods have evolved away from Eastern practices toward approaches better suited to the unique conditions of the Great Plains. Water conservation techniques have developed that acknowledge the precious nature of this resource. Even social patterns have adapted to the realities of isolation and extreme weather. Your community has developed traditions unique to underground and semi-underground living. Roof gatherings during pleasant weather find neighbours sitting atop their sod roofs, socialising while enjoying elevated views of the prairie. Children play games involving running across multiple connected dugout roofs, jumping from one living surface to another. Community celebrations often include decorating dugout exteriors with wildflowers or harvest produce. Even the language has evolved to reflect this lifestyle. Roof neighbours are those whose dugouts are within easy walking distance. To go deep means to prepare thoroughly for winter. A surface problem is a minor issue not worth worry, while wall trouble indicates a serious structural concern. Someone who prefers frame houses despite their drawbacks might be teasingly called afraid of the dark or too fancy for dirt. Winter arrives again, your 5th on the prairie. By now, preparation has become a well-choreographed routine. The root cellar is stocked with preserved vegetables, apples, potatoes, and salted meat. Buffalo chips and cow dung have been collected, dried, and stored in the expanded fuel shed attached to your vestibule. Extra candles and lamp oil are carefully set aside for the darkest months. The dugout itself receives thorough attention before winter's full arrival. Roof drainage channels are cleared, wall cracks are meticulously sealed with fresh clay mixture. The chimney is inspected and cleaned to prevent dangerous buildups of creosote from the dung fires. Additional insulation of dried prairie grass is added to the roof layers. getting the house ready for its winter nap, your youngest calls it, having developed his own relationship with the dwelling. The first blizzard of the season hits in early December, a howling fury of wind and snow that lasts nearly 3 days. Your family weathers it with the comfortable routine developed over years of similar storms. The dugout maintains its steady temperature with minimal fuel. The thick walls muffle the worst of the wind's moaning. The stored food means no one goes hungry despite being completely isolated. When the storm finally passes and you dig out the entrance, you discover that several frame houses in the community have suffered significant damage: broken windows, torn roof sections, even a completely collapsed wall in one case. The dugouts, meanwhile, have virtually disappeared beneath blankets of snow, their existence betrayed only by the chimneys poking through the white expanse and the paths dug out to their entrances. Protected by earth and snow, these homes remain secure, their inhabitants safe. This pattern has repeated itself so consistently that even the most stubborn advocates of traditional construction have begun to acknowledge the practical advantages of earth-sheltered living in this environment. "Might add a storm cellar under the house," admits Mr. Thompson, whose frame home lost part of its roof in the blizzard. "Something like a small dugout, just for the bad weather." "Halfway there," Martha Jenkins mutters with a knowing smile. As winter deepens, your family settles into the familiar rhythms of the season. Days are structured around maintaining warmth, conserving resources, and finding ways to combat the psychological effects of confinement and reduced light. Schooling continues through the winter months, with your wife teaching the younger children their letters and numbers, while the older ones read from the few precious books in your possession. Every volume has been read multiple times, but they remain treasured portals to worlds beyond the prairie. Evenings bring family activities that have become cherished traditions, storytelling circles where each person contributes a tale, either remembered or invented, music from a hand-carved wooden flute your oldest son has learned to play, games of checkers on a board painted onto a smooth stone, shadow puppets cast on the whitewashed walls by candlelight. These simple pleasures have taken on deeper meaning in the context of dugout living. The confined space, rather than feeling restrictive, has created a closeness that might never have developed in a larger, more conventional home. Family bonds have strengthened through physical proximity and shared experience. "Back east, I hardly saw my father except at meals," you reflect one evening. "Now we're together all day, working side by side." "For better or worse," your teenage son jokes, though his smile reveals the comment's good nature. January brings the season's worst cold, a bitter, brutal cold that seems to seek any vulnerability in your defences. Yet inside the dugout, protected by feet of earth and snow, your family remains comfortable with remarkably little fuel consumption. The buffalo chip stove maintains a steady, moderate heat that circulates through the single room. This efficiency represents one of the dugout's greatest gifts on the treeless plains, the ability to stay warm with minimal fuel, while families in frame houses burn through precious resources at alarming rates just to prevent freezing. Dugout dwellers manage comfortably with the renewable resource of dried animal dung. "Never thought I'd be grateful for buffalo droppings," your wife remarks as she adds another chip to the stove, "but here we are." February brings unexpected visitors, a family travelling through whose wagon broke an axle 5 miles from your settlement. They're taken in by various households until repairs can be made, with your dugout hosting the mother and 2 small children. The visitor's reaction to your home follows the now familiar pattern: initial apprehension about going into a hole in the ground, followed by surprise at the comfort and warmth inside, culminating in genuine appreciation for the dwelling's practical advantages. It's like a snug cave. The the woman observes on their second night, as her children sleep peacefully despite the howling wind outside. I expected it to feel primitive, but it doesn't. Takes some getting used to, your wife acknowledges, but once you do, it's hard to imagine living right on top of the ground again, exposed to everything. When the travellers depart a week later, repairs complete, the woman makes a request that would have seemed unthinkable during your early days on the prairie. Would you mind if I made a sketch of your home? The inside layout especially. My husband is considering homesteading, and this design makes so much sense for the plains. Your wife helps her create a detailed drawing showing not just the basic structure, but all the refinements your family has developed over 5 years. The vestibule entrance, the root cellar access, the clever storage solutions, the optimal placement of windows and stove. Spread the wisdom, Martha Jenkins approves when she hears about the exchange. Earth homes for earth places. As winter finally loosens its grip and the first tentative signs of spring appear, your family emerges from the season with the deep satisfaction of having not merely survived, but thrived. The dugout has once again proven itself not as a compromise, but as perhaps the most sensible housing solution for this challenging environment. Spring brings its own challenges, the most significant being water management during thaw. Years of experience have led to increasingly sophisticated drainage systems around your dugout. Carefully constructed channels direct meltwater away from the structure. Strategic plantings of native grasses with deep root systems help stabilize the soil and absorb excess moisture. Working with water instead of against it, you explain to a new settler watching you adjust a drainage channel. Same philosophy as the dugout itself, partner with nature rather than fight it. This perspective, seeing the natural world as a potential collaborator rather than an adversary, has become central to your family's approach to prairie life. The dugout embodies this philosophy in physical form, using the Earth's thermal mass for insulation, its structural properties for support, and its protective capacity for security. One warm evening, as the entire family sits on the living roof enjoying the sunset, another tradition that has evolved naturally from your lifestyle, your oldest daughter makes an observation that captures something essential about your journey. "You know what's strange?" she says, running her fingers through the new spring grass growing from your roof. "We came here thinking we'd conquer this place with our ways from back east. Instead, the prairie taught us its ways." You nod, understanding exactly what she means. Wisdom sometimes means knowing when to adapt rather than overcome. Your wife leans against your shoulder, watching the sun sink toward the horizon in a spectacular display of orange and purple. 5 years in a hole in the ground, she muses. Who would have thought it would feel so much like home? As darkness settles over the prairie and stars begin to appear in the vast sky, your family remains on the living roof, connected to both earth and heaven in this dwelling that bridges worlds. The dugout beneath you, steadfast and secure, continues its silent partnership with your family, protecting, sheltering, and teaching lessons about sustainability and adaptation that would have been impossible to learn in a more conventional home. In the distance, a coyote calls, a haunting sound that rolls across the open landscape. Closer, a small chorus of insects begins their evening song from the grasses of your roof. Your family sits together in comfortable silence, part of this place in a way you never could have imagined when you first arrived. The prairie has changed you, and your dugout home has been the instrument of that transformation, not a primitive necessity to be endured, but a profound teacher of a different way to live with the land. 7 years on the prairie have passed since you first carved your home into the hillside. The seasons have cycled through their endless dance, the fierce winters, the muddy springs, the scorching summers, the golden autumns. Through it all, your dugout has remained constant, evolving alongside your family, but always providing the same fundamental gifts: protection, efficiency, and a unique connection to the land itself. What began as a desperate necessity has become something closer to wisdom. The simple dugout, once seen as primitive, is now recognized throughout the region as perhaps the most sensible response to prairie conditions. Its practical advantages have become impossible to ignore, even for the most tradition-bound settlers. One mild autumn day, a surprising visitor arrives at your homestead, Professor James Hollingsworth from the Agricultural College back east. He's travelling the frontier, gathering information on adaptive housing strategies in treeless environments for a government study. Word of your settlement's successful dugouts has reached official ears. Remarkable, the professor murmurs as he steps inside your home, notebook in hand. Absolutely remarkable. You watch with amusement as he moves through your dugout, measuring dimensions, examining wall construction, testing the packed earth floor with his boot heel, and making detailed notes of everything he sees. His initial skepticism gives way to genuine interest as your wife explains the practical advantages of earth-sheltered living. The temperature regulation is most intriguing, he says, placing a thermometer against the wall. 72 degrees in here, despite it being nearly 90 outside, without any cooling mechanism whatsoever. Just the earth doing what it naturally does, you explain. Maintains a steady temperature year-round, cool in summer, warm in winter. The professor's questions are endless about construction techniques, moisture management, ventilation solutions, structural stability, even the psychological effects of underground living. Your family answers patiently, sharing the knowledge accumulated through years of direct experience. "And you've made no plans to construct a conventional frame house?" he asks finally, seeming genuinely perplexed by your contentment with the dugout. "Oh, why would we?" your teenage son replies before you can answer. "This works better." The professor stays for dinner, continuing his questions as your wife serves a meal of homegrown vegetables and prairie chicken. He's particularly interested in the community aspect. How knowledge has been shared and improved among neighbours, how solutions have been collectively developed to common problems. "It's like watching evolution in action," he muses, "but with architecture rather than organisms." Before departing the next morning, the professor makes a request that would have seemed unthinkable when you first arrived on the frontier. The Department of Agriculture is preparing educational materials for new settlers in the Plains Territories, he explains. "Would you permit me to include detailed plans of your dwelling as a recommended design, with full credit to your family, of course?" Your wife laughs softly. From desperate hole in the ground to government-endorsed housing in 7 years, who would have thought? After the professor's departure, life returns to its familiar patterns, but his visit leaves a subtle impact on how your family views your home. What you had gradually come to accept as sensible and practical has now received external validation as innovative and worthy of study. The spread of dugout knowledge continues through less official channels as well. New settlers regularly arrive with questions, having heard about the dirt houses that survive tornadoes or the underground homes that stay warm without wood. Your family, like others in the community, shares information freely, the spirit of frontier cooperation overriding any sense of proprietary knowledge. "Remember when we thought we'd invented something new?" Martha Jenkins chuckles during one such visit as your wife demonstrates proper roof layering techniques to a newly arrived couple. "Turns out folks been living in the ground since forever. Plains Indians had earth lodges, even folks back in the old countries, Ireland, Iceland, built with turf. We just rediscovered what people always knew in places without trees." This historical perspective has gradually emerged as your community has matured. What seemed like desperate innovation born of necessity has revealed itself to be a reconnection with ancient wisdom about living in harmony with challenging environments. The dugout represents not a step backward from civilization, but a step forward into a more sustainable relationship with specific landscapes. As your settlement has grown, interesting variations on earth-sheltered housing have emerged. The Anderson family constructed a double dugout, 2 chambers connected by a short tunnel to accommodate their large household. The Williams brothers developed a partially bermed structure with the earth covering 3 sides and the roof, but a conventional facade that satisfies their desire for a more traditional appearance. Even those who choose frame construction have incorporated earth-sheltered elements, storm cellars, root storage, summer kitchens dug into hillsides. The practical advantages are simply too significant to ignore, especially after several devastating storms have demonstrated the dugout's superior resilience. Your own home continues to evolve as well. Your oldest son, now fully grown and skilled with tools, has helped implement an ingenious ventilation system inspired by natural prairie dog burrows, a second small chimney that creates cross-ventilation without compromising insulation or security. Your wife has perfected a wall finish using local clay, lime, and a binding agent made from boiled flaxseed that creates a smooth, durable surface requiring minimal maintenance. The days of constantly brushing dirt from everything are largely behind you. The dirt still knows it's dirt, she explains to a neighbour admiring the finish, but we've convinced it to stay put. Your teenage daughter has transformed the living roof into a productive garden space, carefully selecting native plants that thrive in the shallow soil, while their roots help bind the roof structure together. Prairie flowers, medicinal herbs, and even strawberries now grow where once there was only grass. The house grows our medicine, she says proudly, showing visiting children how to identify useful plants. Even your youngest, now approaching adolescence, has contributed to the dugout's evolution, designing a series of reflective metal plates that can be adjusted to direct sunlight deeper into the interior during winter months, significantly improving both illumination and passive solar heating. These continuous improvements represent more than just practical enhancements. They reflect a deepening relationship between your family and your dwelling, a collaborative partnership rather than simple habitation. The dugout has become a living laboratory for sustainable living, each generation adding their insights to its evolving design. One evening, as your family sits together after dinner, the conversation turns to future plans. Your oldest son has staked a claim on adjacent land and will soon begin his own homestead. Thinking about what kind of house to build, you ask him. He looks surprised at the question. Dugout, of course, but I've got some ideas for improvements. He describes his vision, a slightly larger footprint, improved drainage systems based on lessons learned from your occasional flooding issues, a better positioned root cellar with specialized storage areas for different crops. Might experiment with a partial second chamber too? He adds. Something separate for sleeping, but still underground. The next generation of prairie homes, your wife says with evident pride. What strikes you most in that moment is the complete absence of any sense that a dugout represents a compromise or a step backward. For your children raised in this earth-sheltered dwelling, it's simply the most sensible housing solution for this environment, a perfectly logical response to the specific challenges and opportunities of prairie life. The legitimacy of the dugout has been thoroughly established, not through academic theories or architectural manifestos, but through the most practical measure of all, survival through extreme conditions. Families in dugouts have weathered blizzards, tornadoes, prairie fires, and droughts with greater security and less hardship than those in conventional structures. This hard-earned wisdom has spread organically across the frontier, carried by word of mouth, demonstrated through example, proven through experience. Government recognition, like the professor's visit, merely confirms what settlers have already learned through direct engagement with the prairie environment. As winter approaches again, your 8th on the plains, the familiar rhythms of preparation unfold. The root cellar is stocked with preserved harvests. Fuel is carefully stored in the protected shed. The dugout itself receives its annual maintenance. Roof layers inspected and repaired. Drainage channels cleared. Wall cracks sealed with your wife's improved plaster mixture. These rituals have become comforting in their familiarity, connecting your family not just to the immediate cycle of seasons, but to a deeper pattern of human adaptation to place, the knowledge embedded in these practices, when to harvest certain plants, how to prepare for specific weather challenges, which materials work best for various repairs, represents a cultural inheritance as valuable as any physical possession. The first snow falls in late November, large soft flakes that gradually transform the prairie landscape into a rolling sea of white. From the dugout entrance, you watch as the familiar world disappears beneath the crystalline blanket. Your home, already partially embraced by earth, now merges even more completely with the winter landscape, its entrance and chimney the only visible signs of human presence. This semi-invisibility, this gentle integration with the natural world rather than bold statement upon it, has come to feel right, even beautiful, in a way you could never have anticipated when you first arrived on the frontier with Eastern notions of proper housing. Inside, as darkness falls early, your family gathers in the warm, earth-sheltered space that has been the backdrop for so much of your shared history. Births and deaths, celebrations and sorrows, daily work and rare leisure. The dugout holds these memories within its walls, just as it holds the warmth of your fire against the winter cold. Your wife, sewing by lamplight, looks up with a soft smile that speaks volumes about how completely her initial reluctance about underground living has transformed into genuine appreciation. "Remember how I used to dream about a big white farmhouse?" she asks quietly. "With a formal parlour and separate bedrooms, you recall?" "Seems like someone else's dream now," she muses, looking around at the humble dugout that has sheltered your family through so much. "I'd miss the way this place feels, like it's holding us." This sentiment, the dugout as embracing rather than merely sheltering, has become common among long-term earth-dwelling families. There's something profoundly comforting about being surrounded by the solid presence of earth, something that speaks to ancient human instincts about security and protection. As winter deepens, your family once again settles into the intimate routines of the season. The single room necessitates close coordination and cooperation in all activities. Privacy comes through mutual respect and small courtesies rather than physical separation. Conversation, stories, music, and shared work fill the short days and long nights. In townhouses, families can all be home but never actually together, observes Martha Jenkins during one of her regular visits. Now, in her late 70s, she remains the community's most passionate advocate for dugout living. "Out here, we remember how to truly live with each other." This insight that architectural constraints can sometimes yield social benefits has become increasingly apparent as your children have grown. The forced proximity of dugout living has created family bonds of unusual strength, an interdependence and awareness of others that might never have developed in more compartmentalized housing. When spring finally returns, bringing its explosion of prairie wildflowers and renewed activity, your oldest son begins construction of his own dugout on his newly claimed land. The entire community turns out to help, just as they did for your family years ago, but with a crucial difference. The knowledge base has expanded dramatically. What was once experimental has become established practice. Watching the efficient, confident way the community approaches this construction, site selection based on detailed understanding of drainage patterns, precise excavation techniques that minimize unnecessary labor, sophisticated roof layering methods that prevent leakage, you realize how far the collective wisdom has evolved since your own first desperate efforts. "We were fumbling in the dark back then," you comment to John Evans as you help position roof beams using techniques that didn't exist 7 years ago. "Still figured it out," he replies, driving a wooden peg into a carefully carved joint. "That's frontier living for you. Adapt or perish." By late summer, your son's dugout is complete, a slightly more sophisticated version of your own, incorporating the accumulated improvements of nearly a decade of community experimentation. Standing inside the finished structure, you feel a profound sense of continuity and progress. Knowledge passing from one generation to the next, each iteration slightly improved but built on the same fundamental wisdom about working with the environment rather than against it. "What do you think?" your son asks, watching your inspection of his handiwork. "I think you'll stay warm in winter, cool in summer, and safe during storms," you reply, running your hand along the carefully finished wall. "Can't ask for much more than that from a home." He nods, understanding that this is the highest praise possible. The dugout fulfills its essential purpose with elegant efficiency. All the elaborate ornamentation and status signaling of conventional housing seems superfluous compared to this fundamental achievement. As your son prepares for his first winter in his own earth-sheltered dwelling, you realize that the dugout has become more than just a housing type. It's become the physical embodiment of a particular philosophy about human relationships with the natural world, one that acknowledges limits, that seeks harmony rather than dominance, that finds beauty in adaptation rather than imposition. This philosophy, born of necessity but confirmed through experience, represents perhaps the most valuable legacy of your family's frontier journey. More than any material success or territorial claim, this hard-won wisdom about sustainable living in challenging environments may ultimately prove to be your most important contribution to future generations. As autumn returns once again to the prairie, painting the vast grasslands in shades of gold and bronze, you find yourself standing atop your dugout's living roof, now a lush mini ecosystem of grasses, wildflowers, and carefully tended herbs. From this vantage point, you can see your son's new home in the distance, another partially hidden, earth-sheltered dwelling that continues the tradition your family helped establish. The sight fills you with quiet satisfaction. The knowledge continues, adapts, improves. The partnership between humans and the prairie deepens with each generation. The humble dugout, once a desperate compromise, has revealed itself to be something approaching wisdom. Below you, sheltered within the earth, your family prepares for evening, voices and lamplight spilling from the entrance of the dwelling that has been the center of your life for nearly a decade. Above, the vast prairie sky prepares for night, the first stars appearing as the light fades. Between earth and sky, you stand on your living roof, a perfect symbol of your family's frontier journey, rooted in the soil but reaching toward the heavens, simultaneously humble and ambitious, practical and visionary, a bridge between worlds. The prairie wind, gentler now than in the coming winter months, brushes through the roof grasses with a soothing whisper that seems to carry a simple truth. Sometimes the wisest way forward requires looking back, rediscovering ancient relationships between humans and their environment that modern progress has too often forgotten. Your dugout has taught this lesson through years of storms weathered, winters survived, summers endured, not through abstract theory, but through the undeniable evidence of experience. Earth shelters humans, humans tend the earth. The relationship, when respected, benefits both. As darkness deepens and the temperature drops, you make your way down from the roof and toward the warm glow of your entrance. Inside, your family waits, gathered in the space carved from the prairie itself, your underground home that has proven to be not a temporary compromise but a permanent wisdom. A decade passes, then another. The prairie continues its timeless cycles, grass growing, flowering, seeding, dying, renewing, wind sweeping across the vast open spaces. Storms building, breaking, clearing, seasons turning with inexorable rhythm. Your family's dugout remains, though it has evolved almost beyond recognition from those first desperate days of frontier survival. What began as a simple hole in the hillside has expanded, improved, refined into something that defies easy categorization, neither fully traditional house nor primitive shelter, but rather a unique hybrid born of specific environmental challenges and human ingenuity. Your children have grown. Some have moved away to cities or other frontiers. Others have remained nearby, establishing their own homesteads, most incorporating some form of earth-sheltered design based on the lessons learned in your original dugout. Your settlement has grown into a proper town, with stores, a school, and even a small bank. Conventional frame houses now dominate the main streets, their painted clapboards and formal parlours satisfying the desire for status and Eastern respectability that inevitably followed frontier success. Yet throughout the region, dugouts and their architectural descendants remain surprisingly common, not as temporary expedients but as deliberate choices. The practical advantages simply proved too significant to abandon completely, especially for families with direct experience of the prairie's meteorological extremes. Strange how things change, Martha Jenkins observes one cool autumn evening. Now in her 90s, she still visits regularly, though she moves more slowly than in years past. When we first dug into these hills, folks called us desperate. Now the agricultural college sends students out to study our earth-integrated dwellings like we're geniuses. You smile at her characteristic bluntness. Necessity teaches what prosperity can't. The validation of dugout wisdom has come in many forms over the decades. Government publications now include detailed information on proper siting and construction techniques for earth-sheltered housing in treeless environments. Agricultural researchers study the thermal efficiency and resource conservation inherent in the design. Architectural students occasionally visit to measure and document particularly successful examples. Yet the most meaningful validation comes not from external recognition, but from the simple fact of survival and prosperity. Families in well-constructed dugouts weathered the devastating blizzard of '88 that claimed hundreds of lives in conventional structures. They endured the record-breaking drought of the early 90s with significantly lower fuel consumption for heating and cooling. They emerged unscathed from tornadoes that leveled entire towns of frame buildings. Experience, that most uncompromising teacher, has repeatedly confirmed the dugout's practical wisdom. Your own family's original dwelling has undergone so many modifications over 20 years that it now represents something closer to a compound than a single structure. The main living area has been expanded through careful excavation. Additional chambers have been added for sleeping, storage, and specialized activities. The entrance vestibule has evolved into a substantial airlock with multiple functions. Most significantly, your son, the one who built his own dugout nearby, has implemented an innovative hybrid design that connects a conventional small frame structure to the original earthen dwelling, creating a unique integration of above-ground and below-ground living spaces. Best of both, he explains to visitors curious about the unusual arrangement. Frame portion gives extra light and space in fair weather. Earth portion provides security and efficiency during extremes. Why choose when you can have both? This pragmatic approach, taking useful elements from different traditions rather than adhering to rigid categories, has become characteristic of mature prairie settlements. The ideological divisions between dugout people and frame house people that might have emerged in the early years never fully materialized, replaced instead by a practical assessment of what works best in different situations. Many families maintain multiple dwelling options, a primary frame house in town or on their property with an adjacent dugout for specific purposes. These purposes vary widely: storm shelters during tornado season, cool retreats during summer heat, energy-efficient winter quarters during the coldest months, secure storage for valuable goods, protected spaces for certain types of work. The prairie teaches flexibility has become something of a regional saying, applicable to everything from architectural choices to planting schedules to social arrangements. On a warm spring afternoon, you sit with your grandchildren on the living roof of the original dugout, now a lush garden of native plants, herbs, and even small vegetables carefully tended by your daughter who inherited your wife's green thumb. The view extends for miles across the rolling grasslands, now marked by fence lines, roads, and scattered homesteads that were unimaginable when you first arrived on this empty expanse. "Tell us again about the first winter," asks your youngest granddaughter, though she's heard the story countless times. "Well," you begin, settling into the familiar narrative, "we had no trees for a proper cabin. Winter was coming fast. The only thing we had plenty of was dirt and grass." The children listen with rapt attention, despite knowing how the story unfolds. There's something about this origin tale, this account of human adaptation to seemingly impossible conditions, that resonates deeply even with generations who've never known such desperate circumstances. "We dug into the hillside right where we're sitting now," you continue, "used the earth itself for walls, cut sod blocks for the front and roof. It wasn't pretty, but when that first blizzard hit and the temperature dropped to 40 below, you stayed warm while other folks froze," your grandson finishes, having memorized this part of the family mythology. "Not exactly warm," you correct gently, "but alive, and that first winter taught us something important that fancy houses back east never could." "What's that, Grandpa?" asks the youngest, right on cue, that sometimes the best way forward is to work with nature instead of against it. The prairie has fierce winters and scorching summers. Fighting that is futile. Accepting it and adapting to it, that's wisdom. This philosophy, adaptation rather than domination, has become core to prairie identity over the decades. The environmental humility learned through experiences like dugout living has influenced agricultural practices, water management, community planning, and countless other aspects of regional life. As your grandchildren scatter to play among the roof plantings, you reflect on how completely your relationship with this landscape has transformed over 20 years. What once seemed alien and hostile now feels like home in the deepest sense, a place understood, respected, and even loved despite, or perhaps because of, its challenges. The dugout has been the physical embodiment of that transformation, the tangible representation of a changed relationship between humans and environment. Its evolution from crude survival shelter to sophisticated Earth-integrated dwelling parallels your own journey from desperate newcomer to established settler with deep roots in this place. Later that evening, as family gathers for a celebration, your youngest granddaughter's birthday, the unique qualities of the evolved dugout become apparent. The main chamber, now significantly larger than the original, accommodates everyone comfortably. The thermal stability keeps the interior pleasant despite the spring chill outside. The clever light-reflecting systems developed over years of experimentation provide warm, even illumination throughout the space. What strikes you most, however, is how naturally the younger generations inhabit this unconventional dwelling. For your children and grandchildren, a home partially embraced by Earth seems entirely normal, not a compromise or an oddity, but simply one sensible way to live on the prairie. "Remember how confused I was that first day?" your wife asks quietly as she joins you in watching the family celebrations. "Couldn't imagine living in a hole in the ground. Now I can't imagine anything else." You smile, taking her hand. You were the one who really made it home, though. All those improvements over the years. "We all did," she corrects gently, each person adding their touch. This collaborative evolution, each generation contributing refinements based on direct experience, has characterized not just your family's dwelling, but the entire community's relationship with earth-sheltered living. Knowledge accumulates, innovations spread, techniques improve through constant practical testing rather than abstract theory. As evening deepens into night and younger children begin nodding off, the gathering gradually disperses. Some family members head to their nearby homesteads, others settle into sleeping chambers in the expanded dugout complex. The original main room, now primarily used for communal activities, transitions to quieter energy. You find yourself alone in this space as the last lamp is extinguished, the room illuminated only by moonlight filtering through the cleverly positioned windows. In the soft silver glow, you can almost see the ghosts of earlier versions of this dwelling. The crude first excavation, the improved structure of the third year, the expanded space of the eighth winter, all layered like geological strata beneath the current iteration. The walls, now smooth with decades of refinement, still hold the essence of the original earth that first sheltered your family from deadly conditions. The floor, now partially covered with handmade rugs and flat stones, still connects directly to the solid ground beneath. The ceiling, now finished with a sophisticated system of insulating layers, still supports the living prairie grasses that wave in the wind above. This continuity, this tangible connection to your first desperate days on the frontier, provides a deep sense of satisfaction. The journey from survival to prosperity hasn't required abandoning the wisdom of those early adaptations, but rather building upon them, refining them, honoring their essential truth while improving their implementation. As you prepare for sleep, moving to the comfortable chamber that has replaced the crowded sleeping pallets of early years, you reflect on how completely your understanding of home has transformed over these decades on the prairie. Back east, a proper house meant separation from the environment, a fortress against nature with rigid boundaries between inside and outside, domestic and wild, human and natural. Success meant imposing human will upon the landscape, bending it to conform to imported ideals regardless of local conditions. Here, through the Dugout experience, you've discovered a different possibility, a home that participates in natural systems rather than opposing them, that works with environmental realities rather than against them, that derives its strength from partnership with the landscape rather than dominance over it. This wisdom, hard-won through bitter winters, scorching summers, terrifying storms, and countless practical challenges, represents perhaps the most valuable legacy of your frontier experience. More than land claimed or wealth accumulated, this profound shift in relationship with the natural world may ultimately prove to be the most significant achievement of prairie settlement. Morning comes, sunlight streaming through the east-facing window and gradually filling the sleeping chamber with golden warmth. Outside, birds call, meadowlarks, prairie chickens, and the occasional hawk, their voices forming the soundtrack of another day on the plains. You join your wife for breakfast in what was once the original dugout room but is now a comfortable dining area adjacent to a small but efficient kitchen space excavated years ago. The smell of coffee and biscuits fills the cosy space, mingling with the ever-present earthy scent that no amount of finishing can completely eliminate, nor would you want it to. The Pattersons are finally building their new place, your wife mentions as she pours coffee, using that new design from the agricultural college, the one with the south-facing glass wall built into the hillside. You nod, familiar with the concept. Earth-sheltered but with passive solar, smart combination. Funny how things come full circle, she muses. Started with holes in the ground out of desperation. Now the college-educated architects are designing fancy versions of the same idea. This pattern, frontier necessity eventually recognized as wisdom worth formalizing and developing, has repeated throughout the settlement of the Great Plains. Techniques for water conservation, drought-resistant planting, wind management, and countless other adaptations have followed similar trajectories from desperate improvisation to recognized knowledge. After breakfast, you step outside into the brilliant morning light. From the exterior, your family's evolved dwelling presents a curious appearance. Part conventional structure, part landscape feature, the boundaries between architecture and environment intentionally blurred. Living walls of carefully selected prairie plants soften the visible portions. The earth-integrated sections disappear almost entirely into the hillside. Standing on what was once merely the roof of a crude shelter and is now a carefully designed living space in its own right, you survey the prairie that has been your home for over 2 decades. The landscape that once seemed so alien and threatening now feels as familiar as your own heartbeat, its rhythms, challenges, and beauties deeply integrated into your understanding of home. In the distance, you can see new construction, another family implementing their own version of earth-sheltered design, learning from collective experience while adding their unique adaptations. The knowledge continues to spread, evolve, improve with each generation. This is the true legacy of the humble dugout, not just a temporary expedient until proper housing could be established, but the beginning of a new architectural tradition specifically adapted to prairie conditions, a tradition that acknowledges environmental realities rather than fighting them, that finds elegance in efficiency rather than ostentation, that values integration over imposition. As the sun rises higher, casting your elongated shadow across the flowering roof garden, you feel a profound sense of connection to this specific place, to the generations who will follow, and to the enduring wisdom of working with nature rather than against it. The dugout, in all its evolved forms, stands as testament to this wisdom, a physical reminder that human ingenuity finds its highest expression not in conquering the natural world, but in finding our proper place within it. Inside your earth-sheltered home, your grandchildren are waking up, their voices bringing the space to life just as the prairie outside awakens to another day. The cycle continues, knowledge passing from one generation to the next, each adding their own insights while honouring the hard-won wisdom of those who came before. This, perhaps, is the deepest gift of the dugout experience, the understanding that true sustainability comes not from imposing unchanging human systems upon the landscape, but from the humble willingness to adapt, to learn, to co-create with the environment itself. As you turn to rejoin your family in the cool comfort of your earth-integrated home, you carry this understanding not as an abstract philosophy, but as lived experience, as tangible and real as the solid ground beneath your feet and the living roof above your head. The simple hole in the ground that once saved your family from freezing has evolved into something far more significant, a physical embodiment of a different way of relating to the world, a practical demonstration of how humans might live in partnership with even the most challenging environments. And as you drift towards sleep tonight, safe in your earth-sheltered home with the weight of the day gently leaving your body, remember that the wisdom of these pioneer dugouts, this ancient way of working with the land rather than against it, still holds valuable lessons for our modern world. Let that thought carry you peacefully into your dreams.